Hello, everybody. We've been requested this presentation for quite a long time. For some reason, the headless topic keeps coming up in the CMS and DXP industry. It's a topic that is incredibly technical, but at the same time very relevant to this conference because it deals with marketing. If you don't know what CMS or DXP is, just hold on a minute. We're going to explain it for you. If you are a seasoned DXP user, just stay because this presentation is also for you. There are plenty of information for everybody. If you have any question, feel free to ask it in the chat. We have people available to answer it during the presentation. I'm also going to be available at the end of the presentation to answer everything. I'm Julian Maurel. I'm your speaker for this presentation. I've been working at Jahia for 8 years. If you don't know who Jahia is as a company, we're going to talk briefly about that at the end of the presentation. About me, I'm head of cloud at Jahia. I'm managing massive websites and headless use cases across EMEA and North America. I've held other roles at Jahia. But the biggest one was the lead solution architect, where I was in charge of the design and the validation of digital experiences for Jahia customers. And before then, I was a developer. I have 2 daughters, I have 4 cats, and I live in Lyon, France. So now you know everything about me. Just before we deep dive into the topic at hand, I would like to set up some expectation from you guys. First one, there won't be any technicalities involved in this presentation. We're trying to make it as straightforward as possible. We're speaking from experience. Jahia has been around for 18 years in the CMS/DXP market across all verticals all over the world. So we kind of know what we're talking about. We are going to be covering the CMS use case and the DXP use case, which is often not the case in the headless debate for some reason. Jahia has a great footprint in the DXP and customer data platform industry, so we are going to cover that as well. We are not biased in the way that we don't have preferences between headless and traditional. We're able to address both use cases, but we just think that these 2 use cases are not made for every digital experiences. So you should know where to pick one or the other. And this presentation is really an aggregation of customer testimony. Across these 18 years of experience, we've worked with so many customers, so many system integrators on headless and traditional use cases. I feel it's a good representation of everything that we've seen in the past. So first, I've mentioned that I would introduce some terms, and there are really 2 terms that I want you to know before giving more thorough information: headless and DXP. So what is headless? What is traditional? So when building a digital experience, for instance, building a website dedicated to a bunch of visitors, you are going to use a content management system. And this content management system can go in 2 flavors: traditional and headless. Traditional is simple. That content management system is going to output a website. So really it's going to bring the content, blend it with all the technical stuff that needs to go into a website. So HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's going to output it as is, and a visitor is going to browse that website using their web browser. So it's pretty simple. It's what you are expecting from a traditional CMS. Headless, on the other hand, is very different in the way that it doesn't know what web is, it doesn't know what a website is, it doesn't know what an application is. It's a repository of content where you are going to be able to input pieces of content, and these pieces of content are going to be generated as is by the headless CMS. So no HTML, not browsable by any visitor. To make that content become available through web or any other medium, you need to build another piece of the puzzle. If you want to use the content that you've input inside the headless CMS, you need to build a so-called single page application. I don't want to enter into the details of why it's named like that, but just remember you are going to build a custom piece of software that is named a single page application. That single page application is going to retrieve the content from your headless CMS and present it in a nice way as a website, for instance. And the headless CMS world or DXP world holds many promises. The first one is omnichannelness. Since you are not really generating a website, you are just exposing content. This content can be used in many channels. It could be a website, it could be a mobile application, it could be a smartwatch, any IoT use case, it could be a microwave, connected diapers. Really, the choice is yours. The content is made to be portable or reusable, meaning that the same piece of content can be reused in many scenarios, which is also a great thing about headless. On a more technical side, and I couldn't stress it enough, this one is probably one of the biggest one, the freedom of choice of the technical environment for the developers or system integrator. Since that so-called single page application that is going to be built from scratch is not heavily tied to the CMS, it's just going to consume the content, but it's not tightly integrated with the CMS. Really, there are no constraints about what type of technology that the system integrators are going to use. They can just reuse any skills that they have acquired from previous experiences, or even reuse some code that they have produced in the past, and they are 100% sure that it's going to work well with the headless CMS. Whereas with a traditional CMS, you have to ramp up on that technology, regardless of whether it's been built in a good way or a bad way, regardless of whether it's easy to learn or not. Traditional CMS, you are going to have to ramp up a little bit on that technology. And about the DXP concept, so DXP stands for Digital Experience Platform. It's kind of an extension of the CMS world, whereas the CMS is dealing with content, the DXP is dealing with content plus data. So you are going to aggregate as much data as possible about the visitors of a site, be it behavioral data, so what kind of content has been browsed by the visitor, how much time they have spent on the site. It could be contextual information, where they are located, what type of device they are using, or any other information that could live in a CRM or any other data repository that you hold about that visitor. And with all that information about each visitor, you are able to surface personalized content and run A/B testing campaigns, for instance, or sort these visitors into segments to present them with different content. So really remember DXP as a CMS plus data to enable personalized experience. But all of this is really beautiful, but there is a bit of controversy about headless. And I really love that quote from Tony Byrne, which is one of the great analysts of Real Story Group. Headless has become almost a kind of a religious preset. And I would like to stress the word religious because many people have strong opinions about headless versus traditional. And the strongest opinion of all is probably from the development and architect community, because they are going to build that so-called single page application from scratch. They have the freedom to create something from the ground up, which is a nice thing as a developer. They are going to be able to use the technology that they want. So of course, they are going to push for that orientation. Marketers are going to be attracted to the prospect of content reusability, portability, omnichannel, everything is great. But marketers who are not used to dealing with digital experiences in a headless world are often going to overlook some of the operational challenges ahead with a headless experience, because it requires some kind of a mental shift to go from a traditional CMS where you have a product that's been designed to provide a cohesive set of features to build a website. a lot of it is expected as a given, whereas headless, really, you're not dealing with something that is built to create a website. You are dealing with something that is able to author and present content. So stuff as content ordering, form creation, page layout where you have the freedom to move stuff around, content preview, something as simple as content preview, search engine optimization, segmentation, A/B testing, and personalization. If you've worked in the headless world, you might have raised an eyebrow. You know that all of these are going to be a challenge. And if they are not going to be a challenge, it means that you either don't need these features or have been thorough enough to specify all of the features that I've mentioned to be implemented in that so-called single page application. And something that you need to realize is when building that so-called single page application, you are not going to act as a marketer. You are going to act as a product manager, which is a lot of fun, right? It's what I am. We spend a lot of quality time doing that, but if it's not your day-to-day job, if it's going to be in the middle of you and your objective as a marketing professional, which is probably dealing with some ROI or a conversion rate of some sort, or deal with the happiness of your customers throughout the digital experiences of the platforms that you are building, then it's going to be a distraction. So remember, in terms of pros and cons with the headless, you are given reusability and omnichannelness. You are kind of taken away, or at least you will need to explicitly consider a number of things. Content authoring and formatting is going to be a challenge because for you to be able to take stuff around on a page, move it to a different page, reorder it, move it to a different block within the same page, you will need to explicitly specify that in the single page application that the development team is going to build. To be able to preview the content that you've just authored in the context of the website that you are going to build or the mobile application, one, you will need to specify it so that the development team knows that you want to be able to preview content, whereas it's kind of an expected feature from a traditional website. And you will need to teach the headless CMS where to access that single page application. You will need to teach it the URL grammar so that it knows what content is going to be previewed in what context. You will not be, by default, be able to edit some HTML be it in a WYSIWYG rich text editor or any HTML block, because again, HTML deals with websites, whereas headless is agnostic. It doesn't care whether it's going to output content to a website or a mobile app or something else. So by default, there is no HTML editing. Of course, it can be added, but you need to specify it explicitly at the beginning of the project. And I should emphasize here that HTML editing and WYSIWYG, where you can change the HTML, is often used to implement many edge cases. Say you want to interface with a segmentation or an optimization engine, Google's one, for instance. You would often rely on a HTML or a JavaScript snippet inserted inside a WYSIWYG as HTML. Remember, by default, it's not going to be there. And I don't want to, I'm not saying here that you will face limitation. I am saying that you will need to be thorough in the definition of what you are expecting from your single page application. And you should expect the development team to stick around for the length of the project, which is a good thing. Of course, we love developers. I was one. But at the same time, you should retain as much freedom and be free from technical constraints as much as possible when designing a digital experience. And when building a headless a website from a headless use case or any other channel, right? I'm talking about website because I'm comparing with traditional, but you could be building something else. You should not hesitate to be very specific with the features that you are expecting from that so-called single page application. And there are really no dumb questions, because when you are going to be limited to do something very basic, you will feel dumb. So do not hesitate to ask dumb questions at the very beginning of the project. Questions such as, can you show me how to reorder 2 content blocks on a page? You would be surprised how many single page applications in their first iterations are not able to do that. Another one, can you show me how to build a landing page from scratch? So a new website composed of 1 or 2 pages. In many traditional websites, traditional CMSs, you would be able to do that without any architecture or development or IT intervention. Single page application, it's very challenging to address that use case without inserting some dev or IT intervention at some point. Form management, so adding new fields, reordering these fields, renaming these fields is going to be a challenge. Or if it's not a challenge, it's going to require a significant amount of engineering at the beginning of the project. Author a rich text. So I've mentioned WYSIWYG, I've mentioned HTML, which are really focused on website building. There are alternatives to still empower you to author rich text. Markdown, for instance, is a syntax that is kind of open, like you could use it in a web or an application, but it's going to add some complexity to the whole mix. I've mentioned search engine optimization. Sitemaps, they used to be so important. They still are, don't get me wrong. They are still a little less important than 10 years ago, but search engines still heavily rely on them to surface some pages. By default, it's not going to come prepackaged in a single page application. You need to specify it. You need to mention how you want it to look, what kind of pages will need to be surfaced. And all of these challenges, if you've worked with a not so good traditional CMS, might have been challenges also in a traditional fashion, in traditional use case. So regardless of whether you are going headless or not, ask these questions. But in a headless, none of it is a given. So you know for sure that it's not going to be available by default. Some non-functional requirements. So what might you be benefiting from or struggling from in a headless scenario? Search engine optimization, that so-called single page application is not going to do well by default with search engines, which is more often than not something that you want to be good at, right? You want to be able to be indexed by Google and have Google index the whole site without forgetting any blocks or pages. By default, these are not going to be well indexed by Google, for instance, or Bing. You need some sort of server-side processing to either convert that single page application to a static site, which is going to be regenerated as soon as you change some content, or you need to have some kind of a process that is going to detect web crawlers, so Google's bot, for instance, and generate them a real website instead of a single page application. Scalability is usually a good aspect of the headless world, since headless is enforcing a good segregation of duty. You can scale the backend, so the content part, or the front end, the single page application separately, which is sometimes not a possibility in a traditional world. And finally, cost is going to be a big one, because when you look at the pricing of pure headless players, often you are thinking that you are going to win on that front. What you might be forgetting is that you are going to write a lot of custom code, and you will have to maintain that custom code throughout the lifecycle of the project. So it's going to be really a tight integration between the headless CMS and any other block that you are going to be building. This is going to require some maintenance and costs, so plan ahead. And at this point, you should feel a little bit depressed if you wanted to go headless or didn't know anything about headless, but were attracted by the prospect of all the benefits that I presented. And we get it, right? It's a tough decision to make. Projects are usually an aggregation of many sub-projects, all of which might benefit from traditional or headless at the same time. It is hard to commit to a CMS or DXP brand, software brand for less than 3 years because it requires significant investment at the beginning. So you need some sort of a ROI on that. So across these 3 years or more, the requirement might change. So how can we deal with that situation? Well, think hybrid, and it's really the word that I want you to remember for that from that presentation. Hybrid is probably the way to go. Hybrid is a way to make sure that you can benefit from the best of both worlds. Hybrid is a way to make sure that you are dealing with a traditional CMS, able to generate real HTML pages, able to expose all the great features of a content authoring experience on a web page. So remember that those WYSIWYG, HTML editing, content pre-ordering, and form creation, all of it you would be able to benefit from the traditional CMS. But at the same time, if you have a use case that is specific enough that you know for sure that it's not going to be exposed through a web medium, go headless with that hybrid CMS. Only use the APIs that are going to surface the content that you can use to feed some custom application, where the content is not going to be exposed via web. If you need to have some form builds and only benefit from the content of the form and don't want the traditional CMS to power it, again, go headless. There is no doubt about that. Any content that is going to be fed at some point in your funnel, headless is good as well. For anything else that is going to deal with a website, you should keep your cards open. You should make sure that you have a CMS that is able to deal with HTML because it's going to simplify your life. And there is one small addition to this that I would like to mention. If you have an organization that is so mature that it understands all the pitfalls and benefits of the headless world, and they feel confident that they can navigate all these challenges, then go headless. If you know what you are doing, go headless because you could significantly benefit from all the benefits that I've mentioned, and mostly the reusability of skills of your architects and system integrators. If they know exactly what they are doing and you know that you are going to be empowered in the creation of your digital experiences throughout the headless world, go ahead and you are going to have a crack at it. My conclusion for that presentation is that you should be careful with the fine prints of the CMS technology that you are going to use. Do not hesitate to ask dumb questions. There are no dumb questions in this world about how you are going to leverage that technology to create your website or application. Challenge vendors and IT on what the choice means for you right now and in the future in terms of how much development will I need to do to realize some evolutions. Budget for everything. It is often very expensive to interconnect some appliances, and that headless plus single page application plus any other tool that you might be requiring as an optimization engine, for instance, is going to require effort to maintain. All right, that was our presentation. As I've mentioned at the beginning, I'm working for Jahia. Jahia is an open source DXP software editor. We're able to implement great digital experiences across all verticals and channels. We're powering all kinds of use cases across the world, from the most simple CMS scenario to omnichannel personal experiences. Our motto is make digital simpler, and this is something that we do especially well. So if you're kind of afraid of all the complexity of that world in the DXP and CMS market, reach out to us. We're very happy to help. The Jahia team is on hand. look for Jahia in the list of invitees, and if you want to discuss your digital strategy and see how we can help, we would be delighted to help you guys. Thank you for your attention today.